You are listening to HOA Busted. This is how a closed file reopened. You just earned yourself another violation, Karen yelled across the driveway, waving a folded policy sheet in my face like it was a warrant. The management portal audit trail was restricted because of me, she said, and I needed to explain myself right now or she would escalate to the attorney. I stood there with my work truck still running, a service invoice packet in my hand, and I could see the early morning dew soaking into my boots. It was 6:30 in the morning in Duluth, Minnesota, and Virginia Collins, compliance officer for the Heights at Summit Ridge Records Compliance Association, had decided today was the day she would finally bury me. I work as a cable installer, which means I deal with easements and property lines every single day. I know what restricted access looks like, and I know what someone trying to cover their tracks looks like. Virginia had been running the compliance committee like her personal fiefdom for 3 years, and every time someone questioned her, the portal mysteriously went down or a critical document vanished from the shared drive. This morning she was angrier than I had ever seen her, and I knew exactly why. Last night I had submitted a records request through the State Freedom of Information portal, and she had just found out about it. Virginia stopped 2 feet in front of me and jabbed the policy sheet toward my chest. "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She always said that line when she wanted to shut someone down, and it always worked because most people in the neighborhood just wanted peace. I was not most people anymore. I had spent the last 2 weeks digging into a cold case that everyone else had forgotten. A towing incident from 18 months ago that left one of my neighbors with a $1,200 bill and no explanation. The neighbor, Greg, had moved out 6 months later, and everyone assumed he had just given up. I assumed someone had railroaded him, and now I was pretty sure that someone was standing in front of me with a visor and a scarf that would not stop moving in the wind. "I need to see the original complaint file for the May incident," I said, keeping my voice calm. Virginia's face went red, and she shoved the policy sheet closer. "That is not how this works," she said. "You do not get to demand files. You submit a request through proper channels, and I review it for compliance." I smiled, because I had already submitted the request, and she knew it. "That is funny," I said, "because I submitted the request last night through the state portal, and your management company confirmed receipt at 11:42. So unless you are telling me the state system is wrong, I should have access by end of business today." Her mouth opened and closed twice before she found words. "Your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth," she said, and I knew right then that she had walked into the trap. I had not mentioned my doorbell camera. I had not mentioned any camera. But she had just confirmed that she knew I had footage, which meant she had been watching my house or someone had told her. Either way, it was leverage, and I was going to use it. A gate technician with a tool bag walked up the driveway mid-argument, glanced at both of us and kept walking toward the mailbox cluster at the end of the block. Virginia did not even notice. She was too busy pulling out her phone and scrolling through something with her thumb moving fast. "I am calling the tow company," she said. "Your truck is in violation of the guest parking time limit." I looked at my truck, which was parked in my own driveway, not guest parking. I pointed that out. She did not care. She said the driveway extension counted as a common area turnaround under Section 12 of the covenants, and I was in violation. I asked her to show me Section 12. She said she did not have to because I signed the covenants. I pulled out my phone and opened the covenant PDF I had downloaded from the county records office. Section 12 was about landscaping and curb appeal. There was nothing about driveways or turnarounds. I showed her the screen. She glanced at it, then looked away. "That is an old version," she said. "We amended it last year." I asked where the amendment was filed. She said it was in the minutes. I asked which meeting. She said she would have to check. I asked when she would check. She said when she had time. I asked if she had time right now. She said no, and she walked away, still holding her phone to her ear. I stood there for a minute, then got back in my truck and drove to work. My shift was 10 hours, and I spent most of it thinking about what Virginia had said. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." That line stuck with me, because it was not just arrogant, it was specific. It was the kind of thing someone says when they have been editing minutes to cover their tracks, and they know the only evidence against them is a video they think they can discredit. I needed to see those minutes, and I needed to see them before Virginia had a chance to alter them again. At lunch I called my friend Marcus, who works in IT for a regional hospital network and knows more about metadata and timestamps than anyone I have ever met. I told him what was happening, and he told me to get him any digital file Virginia had ever touched. If she has been backdating or editing records, he said, I can prove it. The metadata does not lie. I asked how fast he could do it. He said same day if I got him the files by 5. I told him I would try. I got off work at 4 and drove straight to the HOA management company office, which was in a strip mall 20 minutes away. The office was small, just 2 desks and a waiting area with plastic chairs. A woman in her 50s sat behind the front desk, and she looked up when I walked in. I gave her my name and address and told her I was there to pick up the records request I had submitted. She typed something into her computer, frowned, and said she did not see anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her the confirmation email. She frowned harder, then said she would check with the manager. She disappeared into a back room and I heard voices. One of them was Virginia. I could not make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was angry and she was arguing. The desk woman came back a minute later with a thin folder. She handed it to me and said that was everything they had. I opened the folder. It contained 3 pages, a cover letter, a blank form, and a photocopy of a covenant page that had nothing to do with my request. I asked where the May complaint file was. She said that was all they had on file. I asked if she was sure. She said yes. I asked if I could speak to the manager. She said the manager was not available. I thanked her and left. In the parking lot, I took photos of every page in the folder, then texted them to Marcus. He called me back in under a minute. "This is garbage," he said. "They are stonewalling you. I need the actual digital files, not photocopies." I told him I did not have access. He said then we go nuclear. He told me to file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General Office for records obstruction and to CC the management company, the HOA board, and Virginia personally. He said it would force them to produce the files or risk a legal audit. I told him I would do it tonight. I drove home and spent 2 hours drafting the complaint. I included the confirmation email, the photos of the garbage folder, and a timeline of every obstruction Virginia had thrown at me in the last 2 weeks. I cited the State Freedom of Information statute and requested an immediate audit of all HOA records related to compliance actions, towing authorizations, and covenant amendments from the last 2 years. I hit send at 8:30, and I CA'd everyone Marcus told me to. By 9, my phone was ringing. It was the management company manager, a man named Dale who I had never spoken to before. He sounded nervous. He said there had been a misunderstanding, and he wanted to resolve it quickly. I told him the misunderstanding was that his office had violated state law by withholding public records. He said that was not what happened. I said then he needed to produce the files. He said he would have them ready by tomorrow morning. I said I would be there at 8. I did not sleep much that night. I kept thinking about Greg, the neighbor who had been towed and billed $1,200. He had told me the story once over beers before he moved out. He said he had parked in guest parking for 1 hour, well within the 2-hour limit, and when he came back his car was gone. He called the tow company and they said the HOA had authorized it. He called Virginia and she said he had been parked for 3 hours and the gate log proved it. He asked to see the log. She said it was restricted. He asked why. She said compliance reasons. He paid the bill and gave up. I had not thought much about it at the time, because I was new to the neighborhood and I did not want trouble. But 2 weeks ago, someone posted in the neighborhood chat that I was a repeat offender, and they cited a past incident that never happened to me. The post included a photo of a car in guest parking with a violation notice on the windshield. The car was not mine. The license plate was not mine. But the post said it was, and it included a date and timestamp that put me in violation 6 months ago. I replied and said the post was false. The post was deleted within minutes, and the user account vanished. That was when I knew something was very wrong. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmares where the homeowner fights back. I started digging. I pulled up the neighborhood chat archive and found 3 other posts with similar patterns: fake photos, fake timestamps, and deleted accounts. I found Greg in the archive, and I found 2 other names I recognized. All 3 had moved out within 6 months of their incidents. All 3 had been towed. All 3 had paid bills over $1,000, and all 3 had been authorized by Virginia. I drove to the management office at 7:45 the next morning. Dale was waiting for me with a banker box full of files. He looked like he had not slept either. He handed me the box and said he hoped this resolved everything. I asked if I could review the files here. He said sure, and he pointed to a conference room. I spent the next 3 hours going through every page. The files were a disaster. Half of them were misfiled or misdated. A quarter of them were missing pages. And 10% of them were outright fabrications. I found Greg's towing file, and the gate log showed he had been parked for 58 minutes, not 3 hours. I found the covenant amendment Virginia had cited, and it was dated 6 months after she had used it to justify a fine. I found a complaint file with my name on it, and the signature at the bottom was not mine. I took photos of everything. At 11, Dale knocked on the door and asked if I needed anything. I asked if Virginia had access to edit files in the system. He hesitated, then said she had admin access for compliance records. I asked if there was an audit trail. He said yes. I asked if I could see it. He said he would have to check with the board. I told him I was filing an amended complaint with the state by end of day, and the audit trail was going to be subpoenaed whether he cooperated or not. He said he would get it for me. He came back an hour later with a USB drive. He said the audit trail was on the drive, and he asked me not to share it publicly until the board had a chance to review it. I said I would keep it private for 72 hours, and after that it was going in my complaint. He nodded and left. I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the log file. The log was a spreadsheet with timestamps, user IDs, and file actions. Virginia's user ID was all over it. She had edited the covenant amendment file 4 times after the original upload date. She had deleted 3 complaint files in the last year. She had backdated 2 gate logs. And she had uploaded a fake photo to my compliance file 6 months ago, the same photo that had appeared in the neighborhood chat post. The timestamp on the upload was 3 hours after the post went live. I copied the entire drive to my laptop, then texted Marcus. I told him I had the files and I needed him to verify the metadata. He said bring them over. I drove to his house, and we spent the next 2 hours going through every file on the drive. Marcus pulled up the metadata for the covenant amendment, and the creation date was 6 months after the last modified date, which meant someone had created a new file and backdated it. He pulled up the metadata for the fake photo in my file, and the camera model was listed as an iPhone, but the resolution was wrong for an iPhone. He said someone had edited the image and resaved it, which changed the metadata. He pulled up Greg's gate log, and the edit history showed Virginia had changed the entry from 58 minutes to 3 hours and 4 minutes. Marcus looked at me and said, "This is fraud." I said, "I know." He said, "You need to take this to the police." I said I need to take this to the HOA attorney first, because I wanted her to repeat the story before I showed the evidence. Marcus grinned and said, "That is cold." I said, "That is revenge." I called the HOA attorney the next morning. Her name was Ellen, and she handled all the legal work for the Heights at Summit Ridge Records Compliance Association. I told her I needed to discuss a compliance matter, and I requested a meeting. She said she could meet me that afternoon at her office downtown. I said I would be there at 3. Ellen's office was on the 4th floor of an old brick building near the waterfront. She was in her 60s, sharply dressed, and she had a reputation for being tough but fair. I sat down across from her desk and laid out the situation. I told her about the records request, the obstruction, the fake photo, and the audit trail. I did not mention the USB drive yet. I wanted to see if she would defend Virginia or cut her loose. Ellen listened without interrupting, then asked if I had proof. I said yes. She asked to see it. I said I would share it after I had a guarantee that the HOA would not retaliate. She leaned back in her chair and said the HOA does not retaliate. I said Virginia does. Ellen's face did not change, but her tone did. She said she would need to review the evidence before making any commitments. I said that was fine, and I pulled out a printed copy of the audit trail log and handed it across the desk. Ellen spent 5 minutes reading the log, and I watched her face go from neutral to concerned to angry. She set the pages down and said, "Where did you get this?" I said the management company provided it in response to a state records request. She said, "This is very serious." I said, "I know." She said, "If this is accurate, Virginia has committed multiple violations of the covenants and potentially multiple crimes." I said, "I know." She asked if I planned to file a police report. I said yes, but not until I had given the HOA a chance to correct the record and remove Virginia from the compliance committee. Ellen set the pages down and said, "I will recommend to the board that Virginia be removed immediately and that all of her compliance actions be reviewed for accuracy." I said, "That is a good start." She said, "What else do you want?" I said, "I want a public apology, a full refund for everyone she has wrongfully fined or towed, and a vote to replace the compliance committee with a neutral panel." Ellen raised an eyebrow. She said, "That is a tall order." I said, "So is fraud." She nodded and said she would present it to the board. The board met 2 days later, and Ellen invited me to attend. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the mailbox cluster that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. 10 people were in the room, including Virginia, who sat in the front row with her arms crossed and her visor pulled low. The board president, a retired engineer named Tom, opened the meeting and asked Ellen to present her findings. Ellen stood and summarized the evidence. She did not sugarcoat anything. She said Virginia had edited records, backdated files, and uploaded false evidence. She said the audit trail proved it, and the metadata confirmed it. She said the HOA faced significant legal liability if it did not act immediately. Tom asked Virginia if she had anything to say. Virginia stood and said the audit trail was tampered with, and I had fabricated the evidence. Tom asked if she had proof. She said no, but she knew it was fake because she would never do something like that. Tom looked at Ellen. Ellen said the audit trail came directly from the management company, and it had been verified by an independent IT consultant. She said the metadata was conclusive. Tom looked at Virginia. Virginia said the consultant was biased because he was my friend. Tom asked how she knew that. Virginia froze. She had just admitted she had been monitoring me, and the room noticed. 2 board members leaned forward. One of them asked Virginia if she had been surveilling homeowners. Virginia said no. The board member asked then, how did she know who my friends were? Virginia did not answer. Tom called for a vote to remove Virginia from the compliance committee. The vote was 8-1, with Virginia abstaining. Tom then called for a vote to review all compliance actions from the last 2 years. The vote was 9-0. Tom then asked if anyone had additional business. I stood and said I did. I said I wanted to address the cold case that had started this investigation. I said 18 months ago a neighbor named Greg had been wrongfully towed, and he had paid $1,200 because Virginia had lied about the gate log. I said the audit trail proved the log had been edited, and the original entry showed Greg had been parked for less than an hour. I said Greg was not the only victim, and I had identified 2 other homeowners who had been wrongfully towed in the last 2 years. I said all 3 had paid bills totaling over $3,000, and all 3 had moved out because they could not fight the system. I said the HOA owed them refunds, and the HOA owed the neighborhood an apology. Tom asked if I had documentation. I said yes, and I handed him a binder with copies of the gate logs, the towing invoices, and the audit trail entries. Tom flipped through the binder, then passed it to the board secretary. The secretary read for a minute, then looked up and said, "This is damning." Tom nodded and said the board would authorize full refunds and send apology letters to all 3 homeowners. He asked if there was anything else. I said there was. I said I wanted the compliance committee replaced with a neutral panel elected by the homeowners, not appointed by the board. I said the current system gave too much power to one person, and it had been abused. I said a homeowner vote would ensure accountability and transparency. Tom hesitated. One of the board members said that would require a covenant amendment. I said no, it would not, because the covenants did not specify how the committee was formed. I said the board had simply chosen to appoint members, but the covenants allowed for election. Ellen confirmed I was correct. Tom called for a vote. The vote was 7-2 in favor. Virginia stood and said, "This is a witch hunt." She said I had orchestrated the whole thing because I was angry about a parking ticket. She said I had manipulated the evidence and turned the board against her. She said the homeowners would never vote for a new committee because they trusted her. Tom said the vote would happen in 30 days and we would see. Virginia stormed out, and the meeting ended. Over the next 30 days, Virginia tried everything. She sent emails to every homeowner claiming I was lying. She posted flyers at the mailbox cluster saying the audit trail was fake. She called homeowners individually and told them the board was corrupt. None of it worked. Marcus and I had already shared the evidence with a dozen neighbors, and the word spread fast. People were angry, and they wanted change. The vote was held on a Saturday morning at the community center. Over 60 homeowners showed up, which was the largest turnout in the neighborhood's history. The ballot had 2 questions. First, do you want to replace the compliance committee with an elected panel? And second, do you want to recall Virginia from any HOA leadership role? I did not campaign. I did not need to. The evidence spoke for itself. The votes were counted by a neutral third party, a notary from the management company, who had no stake in the outcome. The results were announced at noon. Question 1 passed 82% to 18%. Question 2 passed 90% to 10%. Virginia was out, and the compliance committee was dissolved. Tom stood and thanked everyone for voting. He said the board would organize an election for the new committee within 60 days, and in the meantime, all compliance actions would be handled directly by the management company with board oversight. He said the HOA would issue public apologies and refunds to the 3 wrongfully towed homeowners by the end of the month. He said the HOA was committed to transparency and accountability moving forward. The room applauded. Virginia did not show up to the vote, but I saw her car parked across the street during the count. When the results were announced, the car drove away fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. The following Monday, Ellen called me. She said the board had received a letter from Virginia's attorney threatening a defamation lawsuit. She said the letter accused me of harassment, slander, and conspiracy. Ellen said the letter was nonsense, and the board was not concerned. She said Virginia's attorney had likely not seen the evidence yet, and once he did, the letter would be withdrawn. I asked if I needed to do anything. Ellen said no, just keep the evidence safe. I said I had 3 backup copies. Ellen laughed and said that is probably overkill, but I appreciate the thoroughness. 2 days later, Ellen called again. She said Virginia's attorney had withdrawn the letter. She said he had reviewed the audit trail and the metadata, and he had advised Virginia that she had no case. Ellen said Virginia had also resigned from the board entirely, effective immediately. I asked if she was moving out. Ellen said she did not know, but she hoped so. I did not hear from Virginia again for 2 weeks. Then one morning I woke up to find a notice taped to my front door. It was a handwritten note on HOA letterhead, and it said I was in violation of the landscaping covenant for having weeds in my flower bed. The notice was dated 3 days earlier, but the tape was fresh. I pulled out my phone and checked my doorbell camera footage. The footage showed Virginia walking up to my door at 2 in the morning and taping the notice to the door. She was wearing the same red jacket and white visor, and her scarf was flapping in the wind. I sent the footage to Ellen. Ellen sent it to the police. The police sent an officer to Virginia's house that afternoon. I do not know what was said, but Virginia did not contact me again after that. 3 weeks later, the management company sent an email to all homeowners. The email said the compliance review was complete, and the HOA had identified 12 instances of wrongful fines or towing authorizations over the last 2 years. The email said refunds totaling over $8,000 had been issued, and all affected homeowners had been contacted. The email said the new compliance committee election would be held in 2 weeks, and nominations were open. The email said the HOA was implementing new policies to prevent future abuse, including mandatory audit trails, third-party oversight, and annual compliance training for all committee members. I did not run for the committee. I had no interest in spending my evenings reviewing covenant complaints. But I did nominate Marcus, and he won a seat in the election. The other 2 seats went to a retired teacher and a young lawyer who had just moved into the neighborhood. All 3 were good people, and I trusted them to do the job right. The HOA sent me a formal apology letter and a check for $200, which was the total amount of fines Virginia had issued against me over the last year. I cashed the check and framed the letter. I also received a personal apology from Tom, who said he felt terrible that the board had not caught Virginia's behavior sooner. I told him it was not his fault, and I appreciated his willingness to act once the evidence was clear. Tom said the board had learned a hard lesson about oversight, and they were committed to doing better. Virginia moved out 6 months later. I do not know where she went, and I do not care. The neighborhood is quieter now, and the compliance committee actually follows the rules. People are not afraid to park in guest parking anymore, and the neighborhood chat is full of normal complaints about porch pirates and lost cats instead of fake violation notices and towing threats. I refinanced my house 2 months after the vote, and the process went smoothly. No liens, no complications, no surprises. The loan officer asked if I lived in an HOA, and I said yes. She asked if there were any issues. I said not anymore. Marcus and I still meet for beers once a month, and he still talks about the metadata like it was the best puzzle he ever solved. He says Virginia made every mistake in the book, editing files without clearing the logs, reusing photos without stripping the metadata, and lying about timestamps that could be verified in 3 clicks. He says she got away with it for so long because no one challenged her, and the moment someone did, the whole thing collapsed. I told him that is the problem with fraud. It only works until someone looks close enough. The funny thing is, Virginia insisted on a deadline for my records request, and the timestamp on her own email proved she had lied about when the files were available. She told Dale they were ready on Monday, but her email to the state portal said they would not be ready until Friday. The state investigator flagged the discrepancy, and it became part of the formal complaint. That one mistake cost her everything, because it proved she was deliberately obstructing access, not just disorganized. Her own demand for speed became the noose she hanged herself with. The HOA removed the enforcement action and voided the ledger entry for every wrongful fine and towing authorization Virginia had issued. The board also updated the covenants to clarify that all compliance actions required photographic evidence with unaltered metadata, and that all gate logs and portal entries were subject to quarterly audits. The changes were not popular with everyone, but they passed with a 70% majority. People wanted accountability, and they were willing to deal with a little extra paperwork to get it. Karen's staged photos got used against her in the most satisfying way possible. During the final board meeting before the vote, one of the board members noticed that 3 different violation notices from 3 different dates all used the same background photo of the mailbox cluster. The metadata showed the photo had been taken on a single day, then cropped and edited for each notice. When the board confronted Virginia about it, she claimed it was a template photo for efficiency. The board did not buy it, and the revelation turned 2 swing votes against her. Her own shortcut became the evidence that sealed her removal. A homeowner vote removed Karen's committee and replaced it with a neutral panel, and the neighborhood has been better ever since. The new committee does not play favorites, does not move goalposts, and does not fabricate evidence. They follow the rules, they document everything, and they answer emails within 24 hours. It is boring, and it is exactly what we needed. The trump card I had been holding was an HOA attorney email refusing to continue after seeing the misconduct. Ellen had sent the email to the board 3 days before the vote, and it laid out the legal liability in brutal detail. Ellen said if the board did not act, she would resign as counsel and recommend the homeowners sue the HOA for negligence. The email included a list of potential damages, including punitive damages for fraud and emotional distress. The board knew they were cornered, and they voted to remove Virginia the same day. I brought a second copy for the HOA attorney, so the legal risk was obvious, and I handed it to Tom personally during the meeting. Tom read it, went pale, and called for the vote immediately. The trump card was not just evidence, it was a loaded gun pointed at the board's insurance policy, and they knew it. I did not mention my evidence yet, because I wanted her to repeat the story first. I wanted Virginia on record claiming the gate logs were accurate, the photos were real, and the audit trail was clean. I wanted her to lie in front of the board, the attorney, and the homeowners. Once she did, I dropped the audit trail, the metadata, and the doorbell footage, and she had nowhere to go. She could not claim she was mistaken. She could not claim it was an honest error. She had lied under oath in an HOA meeting, and everyone saw it. That was the moment she lost, and she knew it. A regional supervisor was only in town that day, and it was my one chance to get eyes on the file. The supervisor was from the parent company that owned the management firm, and he was in Duluth for a quarterly audit. Dale told me the supervisor would be at the office until 3, and if I wanted someone from corporate to see the evidence, that was my window. I rearranged my entire work schedule, called in a favor with my dispatcher, and showed up at 2:45 with the binder and the USB drive. The supervisor reviewed the evidence for 20 minutes, then called the corporate legal team. Within an hour, Dale had instructions to cooperate fully with my records request and to flag Virginia's account for immediate review. The supervisor left at 4, and by 5, Virginia's admin access was revoked. If I had missed that window, the evidence might have been buried for months. The cold case was not just about me, it was about everyone Virginia had targeted, everyone she had lied to, and everyone who had given up because the system felt rigged. I reopened it because I was angry, but I finished it because it was the right thing to do. Greg got his refund. The other 2 homeowners got their refunds. The neighborhood got a fair compliance committee. And Virginia got exactly what she deserved: exposure, removal, and a legal threat that made sure she would never pull this again. I will bring you another story soon.